wrestling and everything coast to coast with your host, Dr. Mike Lano, Evan Ginzburg, Buddy Sotello. So before we bring on our guest for tonight, Dr. Mike has a few things to say. So why don't you say something to the fans out there?
Okay, well, it doesn't necessarily have to be fans, but it's, whoever's kind enough to listen to our show. I've been talking and with Bully Ray Dudley, Bubba, who's tremendous radio person on the Busted Open show, and he's been very much against cyberbullying, and has been citing somebody on this show we talked about for week after week after week, paying tribute to Hana Kimura, who took her own life. She was like only 23, I think that was her age, because of this incredible, horrific cyberbullying. And a friend of ours who's been on the show, our show here, and on our old Legend show, which Evan and I did for a zillion years, pointed me to two other guys that do a competing podcast, and they are libel slandering me with complete bullshit from decades ago that was bullshit back in whatever year, 1997, 98, and retold 100 times, doesn't even recognize the initial lie. And that's slander libel. That's a suable offense, as is cyberbullying in many states now in the US and Japan. They're putting people away now for a minimum of 1 year for cyberbullying and fining them a lot of money. And you guys are better than this. We're all trying to contribute to the wrestling industry however we can in a positive way, trying to help others. So I'm just urging you guys to work with your strengths. I have no problem. My brother's an attorney, a pro bono free attorney, licensed to practice in a bunch of states, including my own, and where you guys are, and would have no problem going after you guys. And whether I win or lose, you would spend a lot of money and time, and it's not worth it. We should all be trying to help each other and help the industry. And, we all want to belong and contribute, and we should be helping each other. And I mean, on this show, we're constantly pro everything: equality amongst male and female wrestlers, equality in pay, eliminating racism in wrestling, all of these positive things. So I just want to urge you guys. I mean, I don't want to fight. I certainly don't want to off myself with you guys completely spreading bullshit. So you're better than that. Let's try to be better. I want to say congratulations on a more positive couple of notes to Russell, Buddy, and my Golden State Warriors. Tomorrow's their big victory parade. I'm not losing my hair. I've got multiple sclerosis. I'm losing my eyesight, not my hair. But that's why I've been wearing a bunch of, I covered all three of the Warriors' victory parades as press. Russell did
this one, though.
Russell did as well. I also want to send a big congrats. We're not, I think those other guys got upset. We criticize Trump and, whatever. I try to respect other people's opinions. So, I mean, I have friends that are flaming Republicans. I just don't talk politics with them. So, if that's set you guys off that we might have criticized WWE or Trump.
Yeah, well, it's going to be hard not to criticize the WWE after everything that happened this week. On a
positive note, I want to send a shout out to Matt Riddle, who's been doing incredible promos. He had an incredible near 5-star match with Roman Reigns last Friday on SmackDown. Also on the AEW side, to tremendous Tony Storm for that match with fellow dentist Britt Baker. And I will throw to Evan. I think Evan's got some, we've got an exciting, Evan's going to talk about exciting show. Evan's friends who are doing a podcast, we're going to be on theirs as well. They're going to be our guests, but I want to throw to Evan. He's got some things that he didn't get to plug properly, and I want to see him do it.
Well, first of all, I'd like to wish all the fathers who wake up tired in the dark, which means gets up early in the morning at the crack of dawn to support their kids, a happy and healthy Father's Day. And
I'm going to be one of those fathers.
That's right. And on the other side, I do want to disparage all of the deadbeat dads who should burn in hell, pretty much, for the misery and pain they inflict on so many innocent kids and the mothers who bore them children who they did not deserve, considering I've seen the effects of guys who have deserted their children, and it's disgraceful, just disgraceful. So with that off of my chest, again, much respect to the parents, the fathers, and the mothers and grandparents who raise the kids when the fathers desert their children. So that's my Father's Day message, the good, the bad, and ugly of fatherhood. And my own father worked 6 days a week, 14 hours a day, never broke 25 grand to, support his family and raise his kids. So remembering him and all the dads who sacrificed and,
But there's some books that you wanted to also promote from last week. So let's quickly promote them too while we can. Let me bring up, first of all,
Well, our guests are coming from the Macho Man show in just a few minutes, Dennis Weber and Eric Gardner.
Oh, sorry, wrong direction. There we are.
And Dennis Pouchowitz has a very interesting book, Good Advice from Professional Wrestling. And basically, whatever Vince has allegedly done, do the opposite. Good advice from professional wrestling. Okay, things you learn from this business. I learned a lot being on the road with Johnny Valiant about promoters and life and agents and the good, the bad, and ugly of this business and dealing with different people in different situations. The forward is by Diamond Dallas Page. I am a serious
guy that I should start taking yoga advice from, apparently.
Oh yeah, I did 2 sets of DDP yoga just this morning, and I'm an advanced student, and you will definitely see and feel the difference.
What a good guy. I mean, going out of his way, helping various wrestlers. We don't have to name them. You guys know who they are.
Matt Hardy needs his help.
Well, I wasn't going to name anybody, but he's hopefully Matt, I think, with Tony Khan's urging, will do that. But there are a lot of guys in pain because, again, these guys are trashing their bodies, and DDP is helping them get off these pain meds and addictions and stuff. He's like a saint. That's what I call him. His real first name is Page Falkenberg. I call him Saint Page.
And even when you're doing the yoga, the DDP yoga, he's saying this will help, your damaged knees. This will help your damaged whatever. It's really an amazing program. Dirt cheap, and it works. And our friend Scott Roma, along with John Cospa, has just done the hardcover version of When It Was, My Life on Both Sides of the Camera. And Scott's had a very interesting life, meeting, political dignitaries, presidents, celebrities, and of course, wrestlers and boxers. And interesting book, interesting life, interesting guy.
Is there any new content in the hardcover, or it's?
I read the paperback. I didn't read the hardcover, so I don't know. I can't answer that, but it's worth reading. That's my point. And finally, Brian Solomon, who's done many of my shows over the years, Blood and Fire, the unbelievable real-life story of wrestling's original Sheik, considered by many the greatest or one of the top 5 greatest heels of all time. And this is several hundred pages of well-researched material. Blood and Fire, the unbelievable real-life story of wrestling's original Sheik, not the Iron Sheik. The kiddies get confused sometimes.
Fireball throwing Sheik.
The fireball throwing.
With his wife, who was, people didn't know, one of the first female promoters or co-promoters, along with Ann Gunkel a couple of years later. But Ev, we had Brian on twice on our old Legend show. I've known Brian forever. In this book, the Sheik book, he actually, where there was several versions of a story about the Sheik. He presents all of them that he can find. That was the very cool thing. He really did some major research. I think he might have interviewed you. He interviewed me because I ran one of the Sheik's fan clubs after the Blassie and Tolis things. But he really well researched this. This was the greatest heel, in my opinion. And there's a show on the New England Sports Channel. It moved from Fridays to Wednesdays now, and they've been having Detroit Sheik full tribute. So it's called Classic Big Time Wrestling. They do try to hawk and push their DVDs and stuff, but the content they promote is free. And Terry Sullivan, who was Sheik's one of Sheik's announcers during the glorious 70 days of Detroit Big Time Wrestling, has been a guest on there. So they've been presenting nothing but Sheik matches, like against Sailor Art Thomas, a tag match when the Sheik turned babyface around 77, 78, teaming with Dory Funk Jr. against Bulldog Don Kent and Stan the Man Stays. That was on free TV. But the Sheik is a babyface, and the fans were yelling, "Go Sheik, go Sheik, go." It was crazy, that brief period of time when he was a babyface.
All right. Well, anyway, we had joined by Eric Gardner from the MotchCast. And Eric, we're waiting for your partner. Tell us a little about your partner while we're waiting.
Actually, I was on the Skype cast with him just before you guys popped on. I didn't know what was going on. We were waiting for you guys to call in.
We had a little bit of technical difficulties to start with, but we're back on track. And sorry for the delay, but we're glad to have you on tonight's podcast and Wrestling and Everything Coast to Coast. Welcome, and I'm Buddy Sotello, and you're already acquainted with Mike and Evan.
We have to bring on Dennis.
Eric, I haven't met Eric, but
I'm calling him right now.
He's at a old classic WWF press conference.
Yes, sir.
Like Jack Tunney. You look just like Jack Tunney. There's a lot more hair up there.
Are we live right now, or are we still?
Yeah, we're the show's already been going a couple of minutes. We had some other stuff to bring up, but it's great to have you on this evening.
Thank you. Great to be here, guys.
I was just going to say maybe Eric's going to introduce his co-host as the new CEO, at least for the time being, while Vince steps away, and Stephanie McMahon with that back.
Isn't that something?
Well, it's still allegations. It's still allegations.
Right.
Got to go through the court process. It is encouraging to see there's an outside investigatory, not an internal, but an outside company coming in. And we just have to wait and see. You can't speculate on stuff. These are claims. But, a lot of it is not so great ethical. It's shown that it was just his own money paying this woman. Then there's the ethics stuff. And I'm just sorry to see Laurinaitis and Kevin Dunn involved in it.
There's been claims of this in the past. I mean, this is nothing new.
Yeah.
So, and if anybody doesn't believe that Vince is still in charge, they're crazy.
Exactly.
He can step away all he wants, but it
still goes by him. I don't think anything's changed.
Right.
He showed that on Thursday night. Nothing's changed. He's still the same. He's still the same cat swallow the canary type expression. I mean, that takes a lot of guts when you've stepped down as the CEO to then show up. That basically
he's stepping away. He's not stepping down. He's temporarily stepping away while the investigation runs its course. And I think we should probably, leave it at that. To be fair to the guy, I mean, he went out there. A lot of people were speculating what he would say, or maybe he would introduce Stephanie or have some angle about it, and she would fire him. That would be the angle. But, saying what he said, it was like, and Bully agreed with me. We had the same mindset on this the morning after, yesterday, Saturday, whatever day that was. Anyway, whatever Saturday was, it was after the SmackDown where Vince came out and said that. Vince was it felt like he was just saying to the audience, goodbye until I'm able to do this again. Maybe I don't have this luxury of ever being able to address my audience in this way again, and doing the character, the Vince walk out there, literally not saying anything but together. But this is on him. It's not everyone, all of his fan base, what he's termed the universe, together. It's him and his legal team. So we'll just have to let that play out. To be fair.
Okay, looks like Dennis is about to join.
All right.
Yeah, sorry, gentlemen. I have some apartment problems going on this evening, so.
It happens to the best of us.
Need your camera, Dennis.
Just need your camera on, and we'll continue the podcast here. But my thought is that Vince is every cat has 9 lives, but I'm not sure that this might be Vince's 9th life, literally.
No, he hasn't gone through 9 yet. I mean, the steroid trial in the 90s was big for any of us who covered it. And those guys flying out there to Stanford, or I think it was near the Stanford headquarters. But that was pretty damn big when the government is trying to shut you down and blah, blah, blah. There was the Ring Boy scandal. I mean, this is on a different level, and it's involving staffers again. I'm just glad. I work with Pat Patterson. I knew him forever. I'm glad he's not alive to have to see and go through this, because this is a different type of case against Vince, and it's not good for the industry as a whole. It's giving a temporary black eye to the business. So I'm sure nobody is gloating over this, because it is hurting the business. I mean, they were allegations that they were, maybe going to shop the company, perhaps. These were allegations only to, like, Disney. Disney wouldn't touch this now.
And
So
Eric,
you were around for
please introduce your co-host.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, I'm Eric Gardner. This over here is Dennis Weber. We're co-hosts of the MotchCast, live on Thursday nights on YouTube. We do a internet podcast with the #1 Macho Man impersonator, Macho Man himself. So I've been interviewing some former stars of the WWF lately and getting their take on the business, and also their memories of Randy Savage.
Oh, who have you had on lately in terms of talking about Savage?
We had Evan on, of course. We've had Lanny. We had Rip Rogers last week. We've had Mario Mancini. So we've had a couple of guys. It's going nice. We're having a great time with it.
What did the Lanny's still like in Uruguay in South America, correct?
Yes, he's still over in Ecuador.
Ecuador.
Yeah,
Yep.
he told us he doesn't do podcast anymore, but I guess he's impressed with Mach's impersonation of Randy, and he seemed, he can tell that we're coming from a genuine place. We're not trying to milk this for money or anything. That Mach is a big fan, and so are we. So he knows we're doing this out of love. So he agreed to come on to the podcast, and we had a nice little, hour and a half, hour 45 minutes with him.
I emailed him that I thought this Macho Man, it's kind of like a living hologram. I didn't know he'd been on your show yet. When did you do your show? Like a couple of weeks ago?
Yeah, 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, Lanny was what, 2 weeks ago, Dennis?
Yep, 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago. Yep.
So that's cool. I'll email him, and because that must have been, I'd be nerve-wracking if I was your Macho Man. If I with the actual brother who, was there during the ICW days and all of that. In fact, I was telling him, if you haven't watched all of that ICW stuff online, you really should watch the Poffo family Kentucky promotion. That
was one of the questions I had for him. I mean, I know there's some stuff on YouTube, but I don't know if there's any, a tape library out there, because I know Vince pretty much owns everything. So
No. I wouldn't sell stuff I had. There are various people that wouldn't sell their product. And if you've watched, I mentioned before you guys came aboard, New England Sports Network that I get on DirecTV. I think it's channel 620 or 624. Every Wednesday, they have a half hour of something called Classic Big Time All-Star Wrestling. They've had my friend Terry Sullivan, who was the Sheik's ring announcer, and he did TV commentary. They've been running. So each week they run like a half hour of stuff they're trying to sell as DVD product, but they're actually showing these matches in their entirety. So the last 2-3 weeks, he's been showing nothing but big time Sheik matches from the 70s. One of my favorite territories, I only get to cover it a couple of times, one of my favorite territories of all time, matches in their entirety. They showed the other night 3 Sheik matches, one against Sailor Art Thomas, who was coming over during the Dick the Bruiser combined wars, where Bruiser lost out in the territory war with his WWA. But so, Sheik destroyed Art Thomas, who's one of the biggest stars in WWA for Dick the Bruiser and Wilbur Snyder. And then they followed up with, it was like from 77, 78, the brief period when Sheik was babyface, teaming on TV, free TV, in like a semi-cage match with Dory Funk Jr. as the babyfaces against Bulldog Don Kent and Stan Stasiak. Tremendous for that period of time. Stuff. There was Sheik Fire on both of the last three of those shows, so it's very cool. And I think Lanny and Angelo Paffo's wife, I think, passed a few years back, so she and Lanny were the sole owners of that footage. So I'll see what Lanny can do, because you need to see. I've seen it. I mean, I taped it. I can't put it up there because I wouldn't want to get sued, and Lanny's one of my longtime friends, as he is Evans. But they did localized promos. They would somehow get on in San Francisco and LA and other areas. But I taped the LA and San Francisco stuff where they actually, then they would cut a promo saying, we're planning on coming to LA, and John Tolis and Fred Blassie and Neil Moskowitz and you guys out there and promoter Mike LaBelle, you guys are all, douchebags, and we're coming in to show you what real wrestling's like. And they did the same in San Francisco, knocking Ray Stevens, Pat Patterson, Pepper Gomez, Dean Ho, etc., and saying, Don Morocco, and saying the same thing, trashing promoter Roy Shire, my two bosses, Shire and LaBelle. So I bet that there's a lot of footage Vince doesn't have. Obviously, he's got most of it. He doesn't have the Australian big time, the stuff there with Abdullah the Butcher, the Sheik, Killer Carl Cox, Mark Lewin, Spiros Arion. So there's quite a bit that he does not have. And the stuff he has, he does nothing with. He's got all this Georgia Championship Wrestling. Have any of you guys seen more than a couple of seconds of it on anything, on Coliseum videos or whatever, since they bought it? No, it's the AWA, they're not showing, I don't know what is on their network, but it's not even their network. On Peacock, it's a poor... and then I'll shut up. It's a poor carryover from the original WWE network, which you had more San Martino title defense matches.
Right.
And now all the music, the rights, intellectual property stuff, they can't have any of the classic ECW music, like Sandman's music, none of that they don't want to pay for. So you have to have generic shit music.
Yeah, they did a lot of that in the Memphis area too, where Savage would go on and he'd say he was challenging Tojo or Jerry Lawler, $10,000 match, $10,000, and he'd beat all their top stars. They did a lot of that. I have one DVD of the ICW stuff, but I think I got it off of Amazon a few years back. So I'd really be interested to see some of the early footage of him. Like I said, I know there's some stuff on YouTube, but a tape library would be great. Now, I've got a couple of the tapes from the master tapes from the Mid-South area that I think it was Joel Watts, Bill Watts' son, for a while before they sold to Vince. He was selling the copies of the territory. So I have a couple of those. And, that was the era I came up in the late 70s and early 80s with Mid-South. And then I was in the CWA for a little while because I've got family in that area. So I saw a lot of the Memphis stuff. I remember the Jerry Lawler, Andy Kaufman stuff live as that happened. So
wow, that's great stuff.
That was a lot of fun back in the day.
That's great stuff.
Andy Kaufman's supposed to get his star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. I don't know if it's happened yet. I'm on their mailing.
Is he showing up?
Yeah, he might just. Or Tony Clifton.
His alter ego, his man.
How many Tony Clifton impersonators will probably show up?
Well, his alter ego, that the comic, that Andy would put on the wig. Sometimes it'd be his manager.
Bob Smuda.
Yeah, Bob Smuda, spelled ZSU, however.
CMUDZA. But
I had to contact him when we got Jack Specific to put out a box set of Lawler and a Kaufman action figure. So I had to deal with Bob, who was, got the family involved, Andy's sister and his parents, and they got some residuals, and they were okay with it. And I'm lucky to have that. I don't think there were many of them in stores, an actual Andy Kaufman figure, not by itself, but with Lawler, which, was just fine, appropriate.
Dennis, I'd like to
tell us a little about yourself. We haven't heard from you.
Oh, goodness gracious, Sarah. I was doing some other little thing. I live in the Midwest, like the Milwaukee area. So I kind of grew up unfortunately, I didn't get to see a lot of the Crusher's matches until he did some localized house shows for the WWF. I think he teamed once with one of the British Bulldogs because I think Dynamite was hurt. So he was in like in a cage match. So I only really got to see him wrestle one time live at the old Mecca. But so yeah, I'm in the area home of the Crusher. But for me, I started watching, WWF, of course. AWA I was in a pretty good spot. I'd get AWA, I'd get World Class Championship Wrestling, and I'd also get TBS, the Superstation. So I got to see all the kind of promotions at one time. So that was pretty interesting, I would say, to say the least, to see, different champions, Nick Bockwinkel's on one side, and then, Hulk Hogan on the other, and Ric Flair and Dusty Rhodes and all them on the other. So, and of course the Von Erichs. So
what period of time at Georgia Championship did you get to see? Did you get to see like the late 70s with Wahoo teaming with Tommy Rich against like Ole and Ivan Koloff, that period?
Gosh, no, when I was watching, it was Dusty Rhodes, the Four Horsemen.
Later.
I don't even know if Luger came in yet at that point. Yeah, it was kind of like, mid 80s when I got to start on that. I started a little bit later than everybody else here.
Good period too. Buddy Landell, who was J.J. Dillon's first protege, at least on WTBS, not Mid-Atlantic, because J.J. managed others.
So were you guys involved in professional wrestling in your area, or how did your involvement in wrestling happen?
Gosh, well, I guess my involvement has been just a little bit more. I actually started kind of doing stuff with independent wrestling, and right around the time when Kurt Hennig actually passed away, sadly. It was my first indie show I went to, and they had, of course, memorial. Everyone was doing memorials for Kurt Hennig. Great wrestler. Should have been a world champion in the WWF, in my opinion, but, but otherwise, yeah, I got to do some stuff kind of, I did some of the grunt work, taking down the ring, putting up the ring. I helped do some stuff with like websites and merchandising and.
What feds did you work with?
The most mainly one, I'm not sure if anyone's heard of it, is Bruce City Wrestling. It's actually run by Frankie DeFalco.
Oh, is he still partnered with Carmine Despirito? Is Carmine still with that?
No, Carmine actually. Where is Carmine living now? Gosh, he moved. I think in like 2006 or something like that. I think Carmine went to Oklahoma and Texas.
I thought he was still in Wisconsin because it was weird. He left like Jersey, where he was born, raised, if I got the story right. Because I used to have to go out and shoot everything, Coraluzzo, everything, Joel Goodhart, and then, ECW when that happened. So Philly, Jersey all the time. But then he shows up like in Wisconsin. I was kidding him. I go, oh, you're in the witness protection program. You had to leave. Was the mob after you in Philly, Jersey? Well, how on earth do you end up a Jersey boy in Wisconsin? That's, just foreign, alien to you. I don't know how you fit in. But he started promoting, and he would bring Frankie DeFalco to CAC and other events. And I thought they were partners. So Frankie's running it, sounds like.
Well, what happened was I think they started together the Mid-American Wrestling, because that was the promotion when I first met Carmine. That was the promotion he was running, and Frankie was I think he was helping him, and then he was also like managing some of the talent there. And then they split, I think about a year or two after. Don't quote me on the years. I want to say maybe 2004, 2005. And then Carmine still ran his Mid-American Wrestling, and then Frankie created Bruce City Wrestling. So they had kind of two different styles of wrestling. Frankie was more of an old school. Not that Carmine wasn't, but Carmine would still have like the hardcore cups and stuff like that. His company was more like an ECW, basically. And then Carmine left. I can't remember the year. I know he ran Mid-American for like 13 years, and then eventually moved on.
Yeah, Frankie's an actual wrestler legend. Been around a long time. Teaches people the proper way. No, he's a good guy.
And Eric, how did you get started?
Well, I was never involved in any of the territories. I just grew up. I was a lifelong fan. Grew up, like I said, in the 70s and 80s, watching the territories, whether it be Mid-South, which I came up with, the CWA, World Class, TBS, Superstation, all the stuff they had there. Just a lifelong fan. I got to meet a couple of the guys outside of the ring, but it was just on a casual level, nothing business-wise. But just my first introduction was with my father when I was maybe 3 or 4 years old. My first memory of wrestling, I can remember sitting on a couch with my father watching a Mid-South episode. And the first wrestlers I remember was Ray Candy, Killer Carl Cox, Dick Murdoch, those guys.
Wow. Let me just say something since it's Father's Day and it's appropriate. For many of us, our first memories of wrestling was our fathers taking us by the hand down to the indie promotion or whoever the local promotion was. And it was some of the best nights of our lives. And now, decades later, many of our fathers are gone. And when you think of some of the best nights of your life, the best, nights of your childhood, it was sitting with your dad. And it could also be your mom, your grandparents, your aunt, uncle, but in many cases, your dad, and, loving professional wrestling. And I specifically remember my father died in 1980, which is a long, long time ago. In 1979, when he got sick, the first time I went to wrestling, it was Bob Backlund. The first time I went to wrestling without my father, I should say, was when Backlund was wrestling Pat Patterson, that great series. They had 4 matches at the Garden. And I was sad because my father was too sick to come with me. Because for 5 years prior, my father took me to Madison Square Garden. And by that point, I was a teenager. And, I just, was able to get there on my own power. But for many of us, our parents, more often our dads, took us to wrestling. And I'm forever grateful and indebted. And my mother, who's gone also, she used to go with my grandfather to the Eastern Parkway Arena in Brooklyn, New York, to see guys like Haystacks Calhoun, Killer Kowalski, Buddy Rogers. And, 20 years later, when I was going, these guys were still around. And my mother could never get over the fact that Killer Kowalski was my friend. Because to her, he was like the most evil guy in the world. Because as a kid, he was 10 feet tall and fearsome. And Mom, he's the sweetest guy in the world, So, on Father's Day, we're grateful to our dads for taking us to wrestling.
Yeah, Father's Day is special. I actually have my dad's 3rd grade yearbook. Yeah, I actually have my dad's 3rd grade yearbook, and then it has a little picture of him, in 3rd grade. And it says favorite sport, and it says wrestling. It says favorite wrestler, and it says Gorgeous George.
Wow.
So
it's in your DNA.
Do you remember when Ray Candy, I forget what show it was on. I don't think it was Georgia Championship, but he would come out. He had a mask gimmick for a time before he became like a South African heel. But he had a mask gimmick, and he would come out to a jazz song called Superfly. And I was always wondering, geez, why isn't Jimmy?
I don't remember him with a. Yeah, I don't remember Ray Candy with a mask. I remember him, like I said, in Watts territory in the Mid-South. I remember Ray Candy. He was one of the top draws before Junkyard Dog came along. But yeah, I remember Ray Candy. Like I said, Killer Carl Cox. I remember him watching him and Murdoch go at it a bunch of times. And then Junkyard Dog, of course, he was the king of Mid-South. He was just. I remember Ted DiBiase's rookie year. I actually spoke to Ted at a convention I met him at once, and I talked about that. I'm kind of dating myself. I said, but I remember your rookie year when they brought you in, and they were, touting the whole, being from Texas with the Texas football team and all that stuff, because Watts was big on athletics back then.
And Ray Candy and Leroy Brown teamed up as the Zambui Express, and both those guys tragically died young. Those guys, did not live to a ripe old age, and a lot of people forget them. But those guys were major, major stars. They were headliners.
Leroy Brown, when he came to L.A. from Dallas, from Fritz's territory, around '78, managed by Eddie Mansfield, he came down to the ring to Jim Croce, who just died. Who died in '73.
Bad Leroy Brown, yeah.
He would be on an endless loop. And I'm going to try to bring him to our show. I talked to AJ, his son, Jim Croce's son, about that, and he was well aware of that, and he just thought it was a kick that a pro wrestler would name himself after that song. And now AJ Croce is, he's a longtime major musician, but he never hurt too much to tackle his dad's material. And now he's touring, and the tour is called Croce on Croce. And he's singing all of those fantastic songs. And CBS Sunday Morning, you can go and watch it. He got a nice big segment today on that. And he's a terrific guy. And he's blind. He went through so much stuff, lost his mom, his dad, brother, and then became blinded by his mom's new boyfriend after Jim passed. The guy used to beat Jim Croce's son up as a tiny child. Horrific. And this guy has a story. I'm going to try to bring him to the show. But that was so cool that he fully realized that, and other relatives, that Leroy Brown was using that music. I don't think once he got to Georgia and he was really finessed as a wrestler to the Georgia Championship for Ole, he wasn't using that theme music. Probably could, afraid he might get sued.
So, tell me a little bit more about things that you've covered in your podcast, and maybe some of the things that you would hope to do in the future, things that you want to cover in the future on your show.
Ooh, that's a very good question. I think, obviously because it's with Mach and Macho Man, it's be cool to hear Macho Man stories. But I also like to see other kind of guests just to hear wrestling stories, being as a wrestling fan, and just as I'm sure all of us are, we all got into it or, doing something with wrestling. I mean, like we had Eugene a couple weeks ago too, and, just telling interesting stories, Cornette having a little accident on himself, and, it's just funny to hear some of those stories.
What is Nick doing now? We lost touch with him. Such a talented trainer, wrestler, everything. What is Nick Dinsmore doing now?
Didn't he was running his own wrestling promotion for a little bit, and then I think he's just sold it recently.
Really?
And I think he's still living is he still living in Indiana? I can't remember now what he said.
No, he said he was living in South Dakota. He had
yeah.
He had the wrestling promotion. He just sold it. He said he's still doing weekend shots here and there, hitting the convention scene. But Nick's still active in it. He's just not, owner and run the little territory that he had. He said it was hardly anything in South Dakota, so they've been running that for a few years.
So
I have a question for everybody. Where do you rate Macho Man Randy Savage among the all-time greats? Top 5, 10, 20? What do you guys all think?
See, that's like the NBA question I always just said, who's better, LeBron or Michael Jordan, right?
Or Steph Curry, my friend. Steph Curry.
Well, see, you almost have to go by eras. You really do, because you could say Randy Savage is the best, but then you could look back in a different era and say, some people think Ric Flair is the greatest of all time.
Okay, so comfortably, would you put him in a top 5, 10, 20, 25, 50? I think that's fair enough.
Oof.
I'd say he belongs in that same category as Bret Hart. I think those guys are very similar careers as far as what they contribute.
Let them answer, because they're the Savage experts.
Sure.
Mach and everyone's going to give me crap for this. I'm going to say top 10, just because it's so hard.
Like out of thousands and thousands of wrestlers, top 10 is awesome. I mean,
see, I'm biased. Savage is always going to be in my top 3. I know, Dennis, I know, but I'm biased. I discovered Savage back in CWA when he first came into Lawler's territory, and the very first time I saw him, I was mesmerized. This guy was insane, and he just caught my attention. And even when he made the jump from the CWA to the WWF, I followed him there. Just in fact, that was my number one guy. And then after he left there and went to WCW, I had a lot of friends that say, "Why do you still like this guy? He's washed up. He's old." I said, "Man, this guy's got more charisma in his pinky than half the roster there does. And even today, I mean, he's such an icon and such a part of pop culture. There's nobody today that you don't mention a wrestler that they don't think of either Hogan or Savage. You know, those or and Flair. You know, but those are the top three as far as pop icons. You know, there's arguments for Bruno, which I believe Bruno. I mean, I have my own Mount Rushmore. I believe Bruno's up there. Unfortunately, I mean, we could get into a whole Mount Rushmore thing, and everybody's got him. But Savage is definitely up there in the top 5, easy. My top 3, like I said, even to this day, he's still my favorite. You know, there's just the talent with promos and his athletic ability, charisma. He had it all.
Total package, no doubt.
Total package, exactly. I agree.
You guys need to see him, actually, the youngest, when he started out for the Sheik. We're back to the Sheik now in big-time wrestling in Detroit. First, Angelo and Lanny came in, and Sheik put the tag straps on, the World Tag Championships of Detroit, on them. Yep. Lanny came in once he got injured, you know, I think it was the farm system with the St. Louis Cards of baseball, and bleached hair. I mean, it was white. And so young. So I hope these guys, I know Vince doesn't have it because he doesn't have any of the Detroit stuff. That was Ronnie and his dad, Pedro Martinez's stuff. And I think that's what these guys that run the TV show on Wednesday nights are selling. And I'm hoping they have that because I got to see some of it at the time. And I think you guys would get a real kick out of seeing him way before his own family's promotion, way before Jarrett and Memphis and subsequent promotions like WWF and WCW. You would really get a kick out of that.
Evan didn't get to answer the question.
Unfortunately, a lot of those videotape stuff, you know, they reuse the tapes. So a lot of the times they taped over.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
Not Sheik, though. A lot of these cheap promoters, like my own Big Boss in L.A., you know, I was a program photographer there, as well as for Shire in San Francisco, where I was the only guy up in San Francisco, L.A. I was alongside 2 other guys, Theo Errett from the After Mags going back to the late 50s, early 60s. But a lot of the promoters, they would bicycle them around, you know, to other cities that had their own TV stations, part of their territory, and then tape over them because they thought those 3/4 or 2-inch tapes were too costly. And guys that had foresight saved all that stuff. Like there's all that Marigold footage, late 50s, early 60s, Chicago, Vince. But even the WWE, I toured their facility back in the 90s, and they're missing quite a bit of Vince Sr. stuff. And I'm talking, you know, 60s. You can't look at a 1966 Bull Ramus Bruno match to close out the old Madison Square Garden or what have you, whenever it closed. So there's some spottiness there and missing stuff, even with the bigs. So, it's very frustrating. So much of that stuff was lost. Like the greatest angle I ever saw, even greater than Sabisco Bruno, was the Freddie Blassie as babyface, John Tolis in Los Angeles, the Monsoul's powder that blinded Fred. They created this whole angle for like 9 months. Fred in the hospital, blinded, led finally to an outdoor Coliseum show that broke all gate and attendance records at the LA Coliseum where the Rams and UCLA Bruins are playing. And a magnificent card. I mean, it had all kinds of stuff. Neil Moskowitz against the original, the late, great Solitario, El Solitario Sr. Underneath the Blassie Tolis, which was billed as the longest feud in wrestling, was the other, even longer feud, Bobo Brazil and the Sheik. I think Neil Moskowitz, a hair versus hair match with Bull Ramus. It just had all kinds of stuff. Guys, it was like the opening match. Pat Patterson was in the opener, sent by Roy Shire from SF. So, but there's no footage of that. They filmed it, and it was taped over the LA Coliseum outdoor.
Brilliant.
Yeah, brilliant. It's crazy. Even the Johnny Powers, Pedro Martinez, it was called the Super Bowl of Wrestling in, I forget what city, Columbus, I think, Ohio. And they had in 3 rings going on all at the same time, a women's, a midget, a tag team tournament, and then all these big, huge main event matches with Bobo and Johnny Powers and Hans Schmidt and Waldo Von Erich and Johnny Valentine and Ernie Ladd. You know, all this incredible stuff, all taped over. Crazy.
Eric, you're on mute for some reason.
No, yeah, I muted myself just so you guys can talk, so if any background noise wouldn't come. That's the problem, I think, with a lot of today's wrestling is there's no long-term storytelling, like what he was just talking about, with Blassie. Today, everything is so, you need to get that, that fix right now, or that reward right now. There's no long-term storytelling anymore. And I think that's a lot of what's missing in today's wrestling product.
Because you look at a territory like the AWA, I don't know how many. Bill Watts, legendary Mid-South territory, even before the UWF, which was terrific as well. But Watts was such a student of the biz, he was booking different territories like Atlanta in like 72, 73. He went to the learning tree of Vince Sr., Roy Shire, Vern Gagne, Eddie Graham. He had all this knowledge, sucked it up from the absolute best.
Suits Mont, yep.
And but I don't think Bill killed the territory with too many angles. Like Vern Gagne would have like only one angle a year. Somebody might turn, something like that. Now, how many angles are like on a single episode?
In a weekend, you'll see. During the week, during the WWE shows, you'll see people turn back, heel, then face during the same week, and there's no reason for it.
How many times did Paul Wade turn? And that was the problem. Dallas, they tried to reboot on the TNT network, but it had a zillion different angles, whereas the old classic Dallas on CBS slowly paced. It led up to not just the Who Shot JR, but all kinds of stuff. Far more entertaining, longer life. And now this crash TV. There's just too much. It's hard to keep track of it. How are you guys? I want to ask the both of you, and I'll shut up. How do you guys time budget? If you're watching everything on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then you can watch MLW and NWA and New Japan Network. How are you guys time budgeting all of this wrestling, and not even including the WWE on Peacock?
I budget by watching nothing. That's how I budget.
But you have it. You've got New Japan World and stuff.
I really watch very, very little wrestling, but this is for our guests to answer.
Yeah, let me ask them how they time budget all this wrestling TV, if they're indeed watching all this stuff. Like Impact Wrestling on Thursdays, it's like a whole 12 hours on Access if you watch it.
12 hours.
Yeah, they show a 4-hour pay-per-view I never bought, but it's incredible. They start with that, and then they have a best of TNA, and then they have the 2-hour Impact. And then they might have another thing on top of that. And then, of course, there's New Japan after that can't miss TV on Access.
I watch the Criterion Channel, classic films from all around the world. Anyway, guys, that question was...
Let's ask them how they budget their time. Do you guys both watch everything?
No. Oh, God. I probably watch too much already as it is. But I'll be honest. Since Raw... I always call it... They used to be called Raw's War. Call it Raw's Bore. Because it's a struggle to watch 3 hours of Raw. It just is. Where Dynamite, just for example, they cram so much in, but the 2 hours goes by pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't feel like it's such a chore. Whereas Raw, you keep looking at the clock, and it's like, oh my God, here comes another promo, or here comes more commercials or packages. That just, I don't watch Raw as much anymore. I'll catch highlights usually, or if I see something big happen, I'll go back and watch. But it's just. I watched Dynamite.
You can tape it and fast forward, to the good parts.
Yep.
That's
Thank
one.
God for DVR.
Yep.
Skip through wherever you want, but I don't even find all the time because I'd like to catch more Impact because even though I know, they're not as big as they once were, which still wasn't, where
They
it
have
was
it terrific from what I've seen so far. I ordered it. I can watch it again tomorrow, but I'm urging people to watch their Slammiversary show. It's incredible.
The pay-per-view is tonight. Yep.
Yeah, tonight's a big deal for them. And I also want to, before we forget, I'm sure both of our shows would like to say to Earl Hebner and his son Brian Hebner, great referee, underrated ref, condolences. Dave Hebner passed away the other day at age 78. He had Alzheimer's and some other issues, and he was a great guy. And Bully. Ray Dudley told us the story of Dave was the guy they'd go to for their draws when they needed cash for expenses or whatever. Dave was the guy there besides all his other duties when he was with WWE and later TNA. But terrific ref, total legend. We lost Dave Hebner, part of the family.
And
Yeah,
speaking,
Tim White-
speaking
Tim White
of referees, Tim White died also.
Timmy White, yeah.
Really? Oh no, he died
Yeah.
today?
Today or yesterday.
Oh no, that's horrible.
Yeah, so this was a rough week for referees.
Yeah, big time.
Hey, I wanted to ask you guys another question I asked Macho Man when he was on our show, and that is, what incarnation of the Macho Man is your favorite?
I like the mid '80s. I like the '80s up into the '90s. The Intercontinental title run, that I think was his prime. I enjoyed the early '90s as the Macho King and all that stuff, but I think the '85 when he came into the WWF up until '89 when he had the Hogan run, which I'm still bitter over the whole WrestleMania 5 outcome, but that was my favorite era of Savage.
Yeah, that's probably mine too. Now, I have to admit, I was a big NWO guy when NWO came around, but it got watered down. That's a whole nother discussion for a whole nother time. But yeah, that mid '80s Macho, that's probably my favorite of him too, overall.
Russ, we should let them plug because we're going to have to cut it short because I won't be able to stay that long, but we're all going over to their show. So let them plug away their show and anything they'd like to plug.
Please, guys.
Go ahead, Eric. You're much better at that.
We're live on YouTube every Thursday night at MotchCast. You can search it on YouTube, the MotchCast. Every Thursday night at 8 Eastern, 7 Central. We haven't had the guest announcement this week, but hopefully we've got somebody who was pretty big in ECW and in OVW. I don't want to throw out any names because we haven't confirmed it yet, but we've been doing this for what, Dennis, about 3 months now?
Yeah, we started from the beginning of the year, but it was kind of like trial and error process, just kind of getting used to doing things. But yeah, guests have only been 6 weeks so far. So.
Yeah, about six weeks. We've had Rip Rogers. We had Rip Rogers last week. Unfortunately, we had some technical difficulties, so we had to cut that one short. We had Rip. We've had Lanny. We had Evan, of course. Eugene, Mario Mancini. I feel like I'm forgetting somebody, but.
Randy Hogan. Don't forget Randy Hogan.
Randy Hogan, of course. Yeah.
When you've run out of every possible guest in the entire world, I'm available for the podcast. So
Yeah.
at the very end of your list, you could say Buddy Sotello.
The thing is Motch wants to do it with a lot of people who have ties to Randy Savage. And that kind of gets difficult, because some of today's stars don't have that tie. But even when we have people like Lanny, a couple weeks ago, I'm sure 99% of the interviews he does is basically about his brother. So we tried to work in a little bit where we covered some of Lanny's history and, what Lanny was all about too, just so it's not all about Savage. We kind of try to mix it up a little.
Those great tag matches in Memphis, Lanny and Randy.
Right, his feud with the Rock and Roll Express. Oh yeah, I remember that quite well. That was a pile driver through the table and all that stuff. Yeah. People
forget that Lanny headlined all the major WWF arenas with Hogan, and he also was on the Saturday Night Main Event with Hogan, drawing millions of viewers. So Lanny, in his own right, had a very distinguished career also. And
I think Lanny was one of the first guys to ever hold tag team titles with his father. You hear about Ray and Dominic Mysterio, but I think Lanny and Angelo were actually the first to actually father-son duo to hold titles. And
those were called the NWA World Tag Titles, although we in San Francisco had the exact same name titles, as did Mid-Atlantic. But the Sheik's NWA World Tag Championships, yep, I think that was the very first father-son, unless Leo and Gino Garibaldi, they held the WWA tag titles in Southern California, Los Angeles, prior to that. So there have been two, but hey, that's pretty big for Angelo, who is total legend, Angelo Poffo.
And also a friend of the show. How can people get a hold of you guys through social media?
I think before you got into wrestling. Lanny, but not Angelo. Angelo passed.
How can our fans get a hold of you guys through social media?
Oof. Well, personally for me, I kind of run Motch's social media. So, I mean, if they have if there's any questions pertaining to anything about Motch or if they're looking to get them for bookings or want to be guests on the MotchCast and stuff, they can just stay contact with the Motch. They can just send anyone towards me if it's somebody that needs to come in that direction. Everyone pretty much, if they know Motch through social media and that, kind of already knows me at least, and they know Eric now too. So they pretty much already kind of know. But otherwise, you can look me up on Facebook. Just look at my name, Dennis, and last name Weber, and can't miss me on there. I'm pretty sure that I am a co-host of the MotchCast on there. So that's where they can find me.
And for those who don't know, Macho Man is the world's #1 Macho Man Randy Savage imitator. And he does a great job. He looks like him. He sounds like him. He's built. He's not some guy in a costume. He really pulls it off. So he's been working the wrestling convention circuit and available for bookings.
And Lanny gave him major props during that episode too. So he obviously respects and appreciates it, obviously. So
which is great. It's great to have that endorsement. And we got to wrap it up real quick because we're doing Jason Amos's show in a few minutes. But Eric, please plug anything you want to plug also.
I'm like Dennis. If you want to get a hold of me, you can do it over at Motch's page on Facebook. I'm pretty boring with, I keep up with wrestling kind of like the rest of you guys do. But as far as plugging anything, I don't really have much to plug. Just that we do like I said, the MotchCast on YouTube every Thursday night, 8 Eastern, 7 Central.
Wow. Well, it's great to have you gentlemen on. When you have anything big to promote, we'd love to have you back on the show again, and looking forward to having you as guests in the distant future. Thank you so much, guys. I appreciate it. Yeah. All right. Good night, everybody.
Okay. Bye.
Kate kurasai.